Welcome to the Tales from Travellers podcast, a show that aims to share the unique experiences of expats, travellers, and those who've chosen to make a life abroad. Through our guests' unique experiences, we will explore the challenges and rewards of adjusting to a new culture, making connections, pursuing a career, or even raising a family in a different part of the world. Whether you're a seasoned traveller or new to the expat lifestyle, this podcast could be an insightful tool or just a fun distraction if you're thinking about taking the leap and moving abroad. Today my guest is Aaron, one of the fellow expats and travellers that went out to Wenzhou to teach in a very rural and lovely area. We are now several years later, I forget the exact number, I'm going to say 5. Let's go with that, maybe 6. And so, first questions first, Aaron. Whereabouts are you in the world right now?
Currently, I'm in Derby in the UK.
A little bit further out from China, but obviously you and I went out there together. We became TEFL teachers, as a lot of English expats do when they move to China.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose the real question that boils down to it, that why everyone went out there, what inspired you to go and work as a TEFL teacher in China?
I just had no direction at the time. So I finished uni, I think exactly a year before we flew out to China. And when I was still studying at uni and I was applying for jobs, I had someone call me and ask me on the phone, when you graduate, would you be interested in going out to China and teaching? And immediately I said no. And they said, we'll send you an email, and if you're ever interested, get in contact. So I finished uni and I was applying for jobs, and I got a job in a call center. After about 6 months, I was just hating life. I really hated it. And then another company called me just randomly out of the blue and said, hi, we've seen your CV. Would you be interested in going out to China and teaching? You know what? This time, let's say yes and see where it goes. So I said yes, and I did the interview, and it went well, and I got offered the job. And then I did some research on the school, and the company just didn't look legit. So I said, I'll can it. Sift through my email again and found that old person that contacted me, and that was teachteflinchina.com. So I contacted those guys again and said, hi, I'm actually kind of interested now. What have you got on offer? So they went through with me the whole thing. And even then, I wasn't convinced. I was like, you know what? I've got this job offer now. Let's go to my job now and tell them that I might move to China unless they can give me a promotion, which they kept promising, but they were never coming with it. So I went for that. They said they'd promote me, and it was about 3 weeks later, and nothing had been done. So I just rage, called the people on the phone, the TEFL people, and said, I'll accept the job. And that's kind of my story of how I went to China. I was just angry with my old job.
I think a lot of us who went out there, we all had a kind of similar story. We were kind of in a state of limbo, a bit directionless, not knowing what to do, and everyone seemed to get just this random phone call. I couldn't even tell you where they probably found my CV. But did you think that teaching would be something that you could fall into, or was the allure for traveling more exciting than the idea of teaching?
Honestly, I hadn't thought about either. Um, I think it was just how strange it sounded was more the appeal to me. I just wanted to be out of my comfort zone for a bit and see what was available. So
Hmm.
yeah, I never thought I'd be a teacher, and I never thought I'd live abroad. So it was just two challenges that had come up to me.
What did you study at university? Was there any correlation between the two?
No, I did business management and marketing.
We all did very different courses, very different degrees. I don't think anyone really had a course that would lead into teaching. I mean, my degree was in film production, so it was probably as far away from teaching in front of students as one could be. But were you much of did you go on many trips and holidays beforehand? Obviously, you mentioned travel wasn't really kind of on your mind, but were you much of a holiday goer?
Um, no, I'd been to like a few places with my parents beforehand, but other than that, I'd never really traveled.
How did the family take the news about potentially you moving to China and working? Did, like a lot of people, do they think it was a bit iffy, a bit dodgy?
Everyone thought I was joking. when I told them I got the job offer, they all thought I was joking. And when I told them that I was moving away for a year, everyone thought I was lying and joking. And then it wasn't until we booked the flight when everyone was like, okay, he's actually serious, he's actually going. And by that point, it was too late for them to try to talk me out of it because I'd already booked the flight. And I think if they'd taken it serious at the time, I might have been swayed to not go. But again, it was kind of anger that no one believed that I could do it. So it kind of pushed me to want to do it.
To be fair, it's not a bad motivation trying to just almost prove it, because it's such a big step, and I think a lot of people, just the idea of hearing that someone, especially a family member or close friend, is going to be moving and working or just leaving the country for longer than 2 weeks, it is almost a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. But
Yeah.
when you got the initial call from them, because I think my overall turnaround when I got the phone call may have been 2 to 3 months, and then I got the confirmation of the job probably the end of the July, and then obviously we were flying out there start of September. Was it roughly the same time frame? Because you obviously had a second company reach out to you,
Yeah.
but did was it same about 3 4 months?
Yeah. So the second company contacted me in about February. And then I went back to this company in about April. And then I think they kind of left it for about 2 months. And then it was May to kind of July when everything was getting done for where am I going to interview for. So they kept me in the loop somewhat. But then yeah, after the interview, it was about 2 3 months until we flew out in September.
It's quite a big turnaround. I mean, even for a standard getting a normal job, say in the UK, that's quite a not a bad turnaround. How did you find the application process? I know a lot of us were almost sure that we would have failed the application when we had the speaking tests and everything. But how did you find the application?
I thought it was one of the strangest experiences that I had had at the time because it was not. I thought it was going to be a super formal job interview, and I remember putting a suit on, everything, sitting downstairs, getting ready to kind of like how we do a Zoom interview now. And
Mm,
it was just a phone call. Hi, we're just going to ask you some questions about English, and it was super. Yeah, it just felt like it was a joke because the questions they were asking were so simple.
yeah.
But yeah, even I thought I had failed a couple of the questions, and I didn't think I'd get the job. But they called me back and they were like, "It's fine."
It was the weirdest situation. I still remember doing mine just in the well in my car when I was at work. I was sat in like 30-degree heat in like May, and having to do this the weirdest interview, which I thought was again just going to be talking about, how do you handle two children who are having a fight? How do you handle your workload? What's your priorities? But no, it was just basic kind of English. What is this sentence? What is the past tense here? What? Yeah, and it was a single interview as well, if I remember correctly, beyond the initial phone call. So it was such an odd thing to think about when you consider that you're applying to effectively become a teacher.
Yeah.
But
They didn't give us any
and
information on the school either for where we would be applying or the city. It was just, you're going to teach in China. And at the time, I didn't think of the scale of China, so I just thought, oh, we'll be in Shanghai or somewhere popular.
Yeah. I mean, I was the same. I think the extent of what I was doing, I asked them if I could potentially have an email address to a co-worker who I'll be working with so that I could maybe find some resources to have a look at. And it was Lanny who was my co-teacher. And she just sent me photos of the textbook we'd be working from, and that was it. And there was difficult to find the school online. It was difficult to find out where we were going. I think even until we got the contract, potentially we found out it was Wenzhou.
Yeah, so I remember that I asked them a bunch of questions like that. I didn't think to ask about co-workers, but I asked, could I get pictures of the school, the website, and then I asked for co-work. Yeah, I did ask for co-workers, but I asked who I'd travel out with. So they sent
Mm,
me yours and Matt's Facebook. I don't know if you can remember, but I messaged you on Facebook asking you a bunch of questions. And I think it
yeah.
was at that point I realized that. everyone we were going with knew absolutely no information about where we were going. And that started to scare me, but I think it was at that point where it was kind of too late to back out.
I remember the day that we were asking the Teach TEFL in China reps if we could potentially have some people's phone numbers because we all had to go to London to sort out our visas to go out there, and they were jumping through so many hoops. Like, well, we can't give you such and such's phone number until we get permission. And eventually we got a group chat set up, but again, it was a
Yeah,
case of we knew nothing. I think even one of the Teach TEFL guys was in this group chat just to monitor it,
yeah,
and yeah, we knew nothing about where we were going, what we were doing, or anything. And then I think we were all kind of like ships in the night as we went to London to do our visas. I remember I was in London and I got a message from Joel, I think, that he was there as I was leaving. And
yeah. So
but yeah, it was all so weird.
I never flew to London. I mean, I never went to London to do the visa. They asked for me to send my passport to them, and they would sort out my visa, which was probably the most stressful experience out of all of it because I sent
Yeah,
them my visa, I think 3 weeks before we were supposed to fly, and my
yeah.
visa came back the day of the flight. And I remember just
Oh
waiting
wow.
around for the whole day thinking I'm going to miss my coach to get to the airport because I'm not going to get this visa today. But it came like, I think an hour before I had to leave to catch a coach to get to London. But I remember those group chats because everyone was super awkward in it and no one was messaging. Like, if you saw how everyone was messaging in that group chat, it was all super formal. No one was trying to act out of place. I think everyone was trying to make it seem like they were a real teacher because everyone was using
Yeah,
proper grammar. Yeah, it was
we
just,
were all trying to. We waited until we knew each other, probably a few days, until we set up our own group chat. Don't
yeah,
know why, but because we had a Teach TEFL guy in it, and I think as soon as everyone kind of clocked everyone when we first saw each other in was it Terminal 3 in the airport,
yeah,
we kind of spoke each other out saying, yeah, we all don't have a clue what we're doing. Everyone is kind of there for just different reasons, and everyone has different backgrounds. And then in the end, we all realized we were such a chilled, laid back group that, yeah, the second group chat was something else entirely.
yeah. I remember just having being super anxious in that first meeting because I've always got this thing about being perceived as weird and I don't want to be perceived as weird. And I remember just for the first week trying not to talk to anyone, but trying not to have a long conversation with anyone to not reveal myself.
I know exactly what you mean. I tend to make a couple of like jokes at times, probably just a little bit, catch people off guard. And I think I was holding back a lot of that. And I think a lot of people were as well, apart from maybe, I mean, Joel was always quite open from the get go, but I think a lot of the group
Yeah.
over the first month or so, everyone came out of the show because everyone realised we were all in the same boat.
I think it's when we started drinking that got me and a lot of other people out of the shell. And it
Oh
wasn't so much the drinks, it was the day after the drinks for me. So I remember the first night we went out and we ended up in a KTV and
oh yeah,
I just got so absolutely drunk that I couldn't remember what was happening the next day. And bits of it were coming back to me because we went out and then the next day we were supposed to have the tour of the school with Linda. So I just remember being not in the best position to do that. But everyone was so
yeah,
calm about like what happened the night before. No one was bringing it up, and I was like, okay, so it's only up from here if I've already been down to the lowest. So that got me out of my shell a lot. But yeah, that second group chat, I think we set it up after we all got WeChat because of the whole
yeah.
VPN issue and accessing WhatsApp in China, which probably was a good thing, or else we would have been stuck in that group chat with the rep from TEFL.
Yeah, I think there was a moment where obviously once after a few drinks, I can't remember. Someone goes, "Oh, where's the weed at? Where's the weed at?" As a joke, That's just prerequisite that. But I think everyone was like, "Oh shit! If he sees that, it's gonna be he's going to report it and we might
Yeah,
get in trouble. But again, there was still that once everyone had full control, we knew what we were doing. Because the group that we went out with, there was us, what I'd say nine about let's just say about nine of us, including Richard and Steph, and then there were about 4 or 5 more who ended up going to the other kind of school in Wenzhou. So we were in the bit more of the laid back kind of rural side of things, and they were a bit more in the city. But yeah, then everyone kind of took control, and we had everything sorted.
because I never understood how they decided to do that split, and then how they decided who was going to what school. Like who was going primary, who was going middle. But I think
No,
when they split it like that, they got it exactly right. And I still to this
no.
day cannot understand why they did it that way.
I couldn't possibly tell you. I know that may forget their names. I know in the other school you had obviously you had Vic, Joe, Gregor, and I forget his name, but they were. I had a music teacher, an art teacher, an English teacher, and a sports teacher. Whereas I think their backgrounds were very much in those. But I still don't know how they possibly designated us to the year groups that we were in. Obviously,
Yeah.
I was teaching grade 2, and you were teaching grade 7.
Yeah, grade 7.
So you were in the senior school, and I was in the primary. But again, not a clue how they came up with it. It must have just been a lucky dip, or again, it could have been a case of they looked at our qualifications and our degrees that we all had, and maybe mine was less valuable than the business management being in films. They'd probably put me with the younger children.
Yeah.
Talking about this first night in China, us going out in KTV. What was your initial reaction about arriving to China? Obviously, everyone thought they were going to get their kidneys harvest when we got off the plane, but quickly realised it was just very warm, very tropical weather, and that we were all out of our depths. But what was your initial reaction to just being in China?
I think I was just, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I felt like I had arrived, if that makes sense. And I remember just having enough money in my bank account to afford a return flight home. So
Yeah,
I had
just in
that
case.
sense of security there. Like, if I need to go back, if I'm hating it, I can go back. But if I'm here now, I might as well enjoy it and try and make the best of it. And I think for me,
Mm,
the moment that set it in was when we first went to the school. And I've still got a video of that moment of when we saw, the school had those red arches.
yeah,
Because I remember looking on the
yeah,
website and seeing those arches, and they looked like they were 3D animation. I was like, this is the fakest looking school. And then I remember going down, it was like this really long driveway, and then there was the primary school on the left and the middle school on the right. And we went into the primary school, and those three arches were there. And I was like, maybe they didn't tell me a lie. Maybe, yeah, maybe my kidneys are safe now. And I remember just at that point, I was like, okay, I've arrived. I'm here. The school's real. It's time to get dug in and see what this life's about. And then from that moment on, I didn't need that security money in my bank account to get that flight. So I just felt, you know, you're here now, experience what you can experience.
Obviously, with that in mind, just seeing the school, it's not a 3D animation; it is real. And we just mentioned how we were kind of like just put into certain grades. How did you find the introduction to the school and then the induction into your job, I suppose, for the next year?
I don't think there was an introduction or an induction. It was kind of, let's walk around the school. And when we got to because we did the tour of the primary school first, and that one seemed quite official, quite, well put together. I think we went to get our name badges first. And yeah, that's something I remember quite, strongly when we were we were waiting to get our name badges, and that whole Naga incident when they were talking about Obama. Do you
Yeah,
remember that? Were you there for that?
I can't quite
So you know how
can't
like
quite place it.
in Chinese they do that when they're thinking about things and they say
Oh
Naga
yeah, yeah,
really quickly.
yeah.
I think we were waiting in one of the staff rooms waiting for our name tags to get printed, and they were having this long discussion in Chinese, which all of us just didn't understand. and then one of them said Obama and then Naga really quickly. And at that point, we didn't know that that was a thing, so it just sounded super strongly like the N word, and we were all
Yeah.
just like trying our hardest not to laugh.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it took us a couple of weeks to realise that that was just how they like stutter and pause while
yeah,
thinking, and it caught a few of us off guard quite a few times.
but the induction to the school was just let's walk around, see what's happening. And then so we did the primary school, and that seemed quite official. You all went into your offices and sat down with your people. And then I don't know what happened after that, if you had a conversation or something, because they took me, Matt, Paddy, and Joel to the middle school during that part. And it
Mm.
was Linda showing us around. And as you know, I don't know if the listeners, if you've spoken about Linda in the past, but Linda was our English interpreter who did not understand English. So we were asking Linda all these questions, and Tong, who I think was the primary school lead for
Mm.
foreigners, kind of stayed with you guys. So you had someone who could speak English, but we had Linda, and Linda could not. So we were walking around the school, kind of asking, whose classroom is this? Who's going to be in here? And then the kids could obviously see a bunch of foreign people walking past the classroom. So then it just turned into a massive uproar. They were coming out of their classes, giving us a round of applause. It was kind of like being a celebrity that first day.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so that was the introduction to the school, which was really cool because it just felt like you're a celebrity. But the induction to teaching was, I remember we would, in the same we were walking around the school. One of my co teachers came out of the classroom, pulled me into the classroom because we arrived a week late into China, didn't we? So the kids had waited a week to meet us all. So he was like, the students are really excited to meet you. Pulled me into the classroom and he was like, can you start? And I was like, what, what do you want me to do? So I remember saying hello and the kids just looked frightened because I don't think half of them at that point, this was their first ever English lesson. So after I said hello, they said hello back. How are you? And then they had that famous, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? And then I asked a question, and their faces just turned stoned. And then they just shouted back, can you speak Chinese? And then that was my induction to teaching, and this is it. And then I went to my office, met my mentor, and she just slapped a bunch of books on my desk and said, you're going to be teacher from those, and then put her earphones in. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I just
Yeah.
like kind of flaked it from there.
That's almost borderline as the same situation that I had. Kind of walked in again. I was dealing with a lot younger kids, about 6, 7 years old, so they were a bit more kind of like energetic, I suppose. And it was the same situation. Here's the book. We're teaching from this. I was like, right, okay. And I remember our first day before we were supposed to be teaching. We all sat in the I forget the name of the cafe, but it was something. It was like a number name cafe
19.
right next. 19. There, that's it. Been trying to remember that 19 cafe, and we're all there hooking up to the internet, trying to put a terrible lesson plan together, not having a clue what we were doing.
Yeah, because when we first moved in, we didn't have any Wi-Fi or anything, did we? So
No,
we didn't know
we
where to
had.
get food. No one took us around to show us anything. I think Linda took us to one shop to buy stuff and then took us back to where we were living. And then that was our introduction to where we were going to be staying.
And that was our introduction to Wenjo. We had the 19 cafe, which we stumbled into. Linda took us to like this market store, and then we realised there was one actually right next door to 19 that she just didn't show us about.
Yeah.
And there were along that road that we were in by the New Century Peking School in Wenzhou. There were a couple of little markets, like a little bakery, and there was a chicken shop. Kind of anything basic that we could have needed, but yeah, we didn't really get a clue too much about Wenzhou and the main city.
Yeah, we just drove through it on the way from the airport to where we were staying, and that was it.
I think at one point, did Linda take us down to the Mixed Sea Mall, or was that something that we kind of just we all kind of just explored on our own accord?
I think we explored that ourselves. I think a few of you guys went into town, and when you were taking a bus from where we were living into the city centre, you went past Mixie and then came back and told everyone about it. And then it was kind of, oh, let's all go see what it's about and see what's there. And then that's when we found out about the fact that they do have Starbucks in China and a Pizza Hut, because all of that was like lost knowledge to us. We didn't know about anything.
You kind of hear a lot about. I mean, when doing research before going out, it was a case of, yeah, you can't use Google, you can't do this. They don't have like all this kind of stuff out there, and you kind of think, right, okay, so mainland China itself is completely separate to Hong Kong, and so you kind of naturally assume a lot of these Western businesses and food companies and all won't be there. So you might have like the Chinese knockoff. But no, it was interesting. I remember there was a Toys R Us, there was a Under Armour shop, and
Yeah,
Starbucks. It was, I think, our first meal on our first night out before going to KTV was actually everyone stumbling into a McDonald's and
yeah.
experiencing the Chinese McDonald's menu.
And I remember I didn't even get fries when I was there. I got a rice bowl with chicken in it, which
Yeah.
again was weird to me and alien to think you can get rice in a McDonald's.
Just going back into it, you mentioned that your co-teacher just threw the books onto your desk. We're learning from this. Put our headphones in. I know a lot of you guys in the secondary senior school were a bit more, I suppose, independent, and you kind of had you had to like basically walk on your own 2 feet compared to a lot of us in the primary school. Because I feel like we had a lot more kind of eyes on us just because we had Tong down like on the same strip. We were all
Yeah,
down in the same building. But how did you go about kind of developing working as a teacher? How did you kind of grow as a teacher over that first year? Was it just trial and error?
yeah, it was purely trial and error. It was what can I get the students to respond to in a positive way? So I think for me, each lesson became more like a performance than it did teaching a lesson. And then if I could make, if I could roll whatever they're learning from in the book into it, then that would be an added benefit. And then I had no kind of conversation with anyone else who was teaching. So at one point, I just gave up on the book and kind of thought of lesson plans myself. So I remember, yeah, it was in the first 2 weeks, everyone was using like PowerPoint, and PowerPoint was just like our saving grace. It was go to Google, find out what words I want to say, translate that, and then put the English word next to the translation, and then that's how I'll teach them the word. And then I think for me, um, I started that in the first maybe month, and then I thought, well, then I'm kind of not needed here if that's all I'm going to do, because they can just look up the word and look up the translation. That's kind of, makes me redundant in that whole presentation. So then that's when I decided to start having fun with lesson planning and kind of take my own spin on it. And then I did that famous lesson, which Paddy and Joel always, bring up when they're trying to make fun of me, was the what's in my bag lesson, which was just me. I think I was gonna plan a lesson and I just couldn't be bothered to. So it was a spur of the moment. What can I teach? I've got to teach something, and it was the day before, and I was just looking around at like trying to get inspiration, and I just saw my bag, trying to go through the things that were in my bag to try to get more inspiration. I was like, if I just chuck some extra stuff in here, that's a really good vocab lesson. Because I had my umbrella, my keys, my wallet, just everything in my bag. So I was like, you know what, chuck in a wallet, chuck in a charger, chuck in some food, and I can teach the students about, the things I prepare for my day, what goes into my bag, and kind of what they're used for, and then teach them all that in English, and then they can go in around, play with my bag, pull something out, and go, oh, this is my wallet. It has my cash, and then there's a simple sentence structure with simple vocabulary, which they can easily learn and identify with the things that they're seeing. So then they had a lot more fun engaging with me on that level than just seeing me stand at the front of the classroom shouting words and getting them to shout back. So that's kind of how I took to teaching. I never had any guidance from anyone else. It was kind of, like you said, trial and error, see what works.
Did you ever feel like, because I know a lot of us who were in the primary school, we do kind of class ourselves as almost like glorified babysitters. Our classes were always the ones that would be kind of like cancelled first if there was a school event. We would always have our lesson plans interrupted if the school had some marketing they wanted to do, and we had a video team walk in, which happened to me a few times. How did you kind of perceive yourself in kind of within the school environment? Did you find yourself thinking I am a teacher, or that you are just here as almost a piece to justify the parents paying for this private education?
A bit of both, really. I think in the first term, I took myself super serious as a teacher. I wanted to be respected by the other teachers and by the students. And then in the second semester, it was, we're just here to put on a performance and make the kids laugh. And if they can speak English at the end of the day, then that's a bonus. We're just here for fun. And then towards the second part of the second semester, I kind of thought, it's what you make it. If you want to be seen as a teacher, act like a teacher. If you want to have fun, then have fun. So, some weeks I tried to be a teacher, and then some weeks I would just turn up to a lesson with nothing planned and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Because I knew there would not be any, comeback on if I didn't prepare anything.
Now, do you think there was there a long time, because you were out in China for 2.5 years before COVID hit. You were in Wenzhou for 2 of those years. Did you picture yourself having a long term plan as a teacher, or is it kind of the standard answer of when it came time to the contract renewal, I'll just do one more year?
So the first year in China, when I first went out there, it was we're going to do it for a year, and then we're going to go home because we probably won't like it. And then I finished the first year, and I just remember thinking, I can't go home now. I'm just having too much fun. This is the way I want to live. So I did that year, and then the second year wasn't as fun as the first year. There was a lot of drama going on. We won't go into too much detail on that, but there was a lot of drama going on, and I just wanted to get out of that kind of environment. So then I moved to Beijing, and my plan for Beijing was to do 2 years in Beijing and then come back to the UK and stop teaching because my ambition wasn't to be a teacher. I wanted to do something more in line with my degree. So that was my plan, and then COVID cut everything short. So I just had to do kind of what was my 2 year plan in 6 months because I just couldn't get back to the country.
What was the deciding factor for such a big city like Beijing as opposed to moving to one of the other kind of lesser known like districts of China?
I don't think there was a deciding factor. I think I was just applying for jobs with a certain salary, and it was the first one that would say yes to me that looked like an all right environment that would do for me. So
Yeah.
Beijing just happened to be the first ones to give me a contract.
When I was looking, I was doing something similar before I decided to leave, and it was just you try and find something with a nice pay bracket within a nice school and potentially a nice area to just enjoy the time in.
Yeah. I think from living in Wenzhou, it showed me that the area didn't really matter. It's more about the people that, you're with. So when I was going into Beijing, before I signed a contract, I flew out to the school and I saw kind of the living area for teachers, and it looked somewhat similar to where we were living in Wenzhou. So I was fine with it at that point.
We were quite fortunate with the living conditions in Wenzhou. I think, from what I've heard, one of these students' parents actually owned the building and rented out the rooms to the school. We were all quite lucky to have our own one bed apartment and that we didn't have to pay anything for. It was
Yeah,
extremely cushy.
I love that apartment. I think living in that apartment changed my view on kind of how I wanted to live my life
Yeah.
because I
In
hate
what way?
like when I came home and I was living with my parents again, I hated it. And then I moved out and started living with other people. and I just hated it. And all I kind of wanted was just my own space to, just somewhere to call my own where it was just chill and had good vibes. So I was looking into buying a house, and I just felt like it was too large. I don't need that much space. So now I just live in a one-bed apartment again, and I'll probably just buy a place like this in a couple of months.
I agree. I changed almost the way it was quite minimalist as well. I think a lot of people, because no one really knew they'd be staying there for a year or 2 years. I think only a
Yeah,
few people tried to make the apartment feel quite homely, but everyone else was fairly minimalist in what they added to the apartment. It was more of a case of necessity and need over just wants and desires.
yeah. It was my thinking was this isn't permanent, so I don't need to buy anything that's not already here that I don't need to live with. Like I think Steph bought a Christmas tree,
Yeah.
and it was a plastic one as well. And I was just like, well, that's gonna last for like 20 years. You don't need to go that far in the future. Either get a real one that you can throw away at the end, or just put a picture on the TV at Christmas, and that will do.
Yeah, Steph was probably the bougiest when it came to pimping out her apartment. I mean, Joel went another way of getting a giant, white furry rug, but
Yeah.
I think that was the classic misunderstanding of Taobao, where we didn't understand the wording to know what size it was, and I think the one that Joel thought he bought was smaller than it actually was.
Well, Taobao was a thing, like it's a whole different discussion, isn't it? Because the amount of things that were on there and how cheap they were. Like I never filled my apartment with anything big, but I got like a really big buying shoe problem when I was living in China. Like every month I could spend over £100 on shoes because I would just go on Taobao and start scrolling through kind of what's available.
Yeah, you were quite the sneakerhead. I mean, I remember once, weren't you looking for The Rock was releasing his Under Armour collaboration shoe, and you were debating about waiting in line at Under Armour.
Yeah, there was that. There were I think Kanye released those Yeezy Red Octobers, which were like £15,000. And I remember us like thinking in China we're super rich, we'll be able to afford anything. So I was
Yeah,
thinking I'd be able to get those, and I was just like kidding myself. But then those did you see those the Nike versions of the Back to the Future shoes with the automatic laces?
yes.
They were about £600, and I was so close to buying them a couple of times on Taobao just because we used to have to convert everything from um yeah, what is it? RMB to pounds,
Mm.
and I did the conversion wrong once, and I thought they were like £200, so I thought I was getting a steal, and then I'd missed a couple of numbers and checked again, and they were like almost triple the price. So
You didn't buy them, I'm
no, I
guessing then.
didn't. Like looking back now, I kind of regret not buying them, um, just because of we were saving so much money back then compared to here because
Mm.
we didn't have to pay for our apartments, and the cost of living out there was almost nothing, to the point where I think in the first semester of the first year, I don't think I cooked once. I think I was just eating out every day. 19 made a fortune out of us that.
Yeah, we were killing it, working our way through their menu for that first year.
Yeah. Like I couldn't read Chinese, but I could read their menu back to front because we just were there so often.
Yeah, I think when everyone learned where their favorites were, like the entire like fried chicken, or once you realised they had normal pizzas,
Yeah.
yeah, we were sorted.
I remember when we got those
Um,
bikes as well.
yeah,
When
that was probably the first massive purchase I think we all did. I think we did that about maybe month two. I think we all bought them around October when we got the pay.
Yeah, because Joel and Banda got theirs first, and then
All
I
that
think it
piece,
was you
that
and I.
broken.
Yeah, they got. Didn't they get a second-hand one, and it was horrible.
Yeah,
And then they found a shop near the school and found out that to get this bike, it was £300, and to charge it was like 10p a day. and you didn't need insurance. So we could get around the city again and do everything independently for £300 for the year.
Mm.
I think after that we were sold. And I remember when we first got those bikes, we were all super, let's put our helmets on, let's be sensible, stop at every red light. And I think after about 3 weeks, I don't even think it was that. It was okay, we don't need to wear the helmets, we're fine. What, the Chinese people aren't stopping at red lights? Let's go through them as well then. And then racing through cars, just trying to get everywhere as fast as possible.
Yeah, we did become proper, native riders, just weaving in and out of traffic. And not encouraging people to ride without a helmet, but it did become a case of who could last the longest before having an accident.
Yeah.
And I know I had one mainly because the build quality wasn't fantastic. My brakes ran out, and I think I slid off into a crossroads.
All right.
I remember, yeah, that wasn't great. But from that day on, I did wear my helmet all the time. But yeah,
Yeah, I had a few minor incidents, but all mine were caused by me. So I think I hit two cars in a taxi, but
yeah,
there was never anything like where I came off my bike. It was kind of I, two cars I brushed into them, but the taxi I was going the wrong way down the road, and it
mm,
was the passenger of the taxi opened the door. Obviously, they looked behind them to make sure nothing was coming. Didn't expect anyone to come from the front. So they opened the door and my bike closed it. And then I almost fell off, but I managed to stabilize myself. But I think after that, my lesson then wasn't put on your helmet and drive on the right side of the road. It was look out for taxis, which,
yeah, taxis were the worst.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the um the bikes were a very much a double-ended sword. It was a case of we could go where we want, but we all knew that we could almost get away with everything because there was so many times where you'd hit something, and there was never a case of having to worry about insurance, as you mentioned that we never had.
yeah,
But there were so many times where we weren't involved, but we saw other like Chinese people getting in accidents, and it's just a case of they probably yell at each other, then they got on their bikes or in their car and they buggered off.
yeah. And I remember we'd get away with anything with one line, which was just saying in Chinese, "Sorry, I don't speak Chinese." I
Yeah.
remember getting stopped by the police for the bikes and them asking me for, to show papers or a license or something. And I just said, I don't speak Chinese. And the guy's face just dropped, like, I've not got the energy for this, and just sent me on my way and stopped the next Chinese person that went past.
Yeah, that was always the fun bit. I remember when because no one realised it, but the bikes had two seats on them, but they weren't allowed to have two people on them. They were solely for one person, and I got stopped a few times when giving like one of my co-workers a lift or like one of you guys. We were just going back to the before to the thing, just getting pulled over, and they're like, you can't do this. One person, one. I was like, that was it. Ting padong, ting padong,
Yeah,
and then well, I try not to play the card too much, but
yeah, that was my
the
saving grace. Like, the moment I thought I'm in trouble here, just ting badong. Ting badong would save the day.
yeah, so too many times, and then it just became screaming it out when we've had one too many drinks.
Yeah. Or I love you to taxi drivers. That came out
Oh
too many
yeah,
times when we had too many drinks.
yeah, that came out one too often. We did become the typical yob tourists, then just getting too drunk in the back of a taxi.
Yeah.
Uh, with your bike as well, we obviously mentioned it gives you that unlimited freedom within the range of the electric charger it gives you. You were always trying to make the most of the weekends and enjoying it. You mentioned obviously your weekend kind of started, as soon as our meeting finished on a Friday. Um, and you said before we started recording that you do a bit of prep when it comes to exploring, but when it came to your weekends in China, how did you plan which way to go, what to explore, and just what to do? How did you plan your weekends?
Um, well, it depends. If we had plans within the group, then I might stick with the group. But if there were no plans and I didn't want to, stay in my apartment just barely watching YouTube on a horrible VPN, I would just open up a map, kind of zoom in to see where there's like a water feature or something that might be interesting and seeing. if my bike would have range to get there, and if not, then praying that there was a charging point there. So I would just, yeah, try to explore as much as possible. And if I couldn't do it in this city, it was super cheap to get a train ticket and go somewhere for the weekend. So I never wanted to stop when I was in China. I always wanted to just keep getting up and moving. And I think once we had those bikes, it was just get on it and go and see where you end up.
With the trains, how far did you go? I know you went to you visited Shanghai and Chengdu a few times. Were there any other places that you went around in China for the long weeks or weekends?
Um, Hangzhou, I went to Hangzhou, which was quite, between um, Shanghai and Wenzhou. And when I was living in Beijing, we had an extra long weekend, and I went to Inner Mongolia, which was really different. Went to see a desert, which was on my bucket list. So
And with all these places darting around China, making the most of it, exploring whatever you can. Obviously, we were quite rural. We were not really at all in a kind of a Western touristy place of Wenzhou. We were, I think, was it 4 hours by train from Shanghai?
yeah,
Um, what was your experience like with culture shock as you were kind of darting around, especially when you went out, say, by yourself for a ride on the bike?
I think once after like a month or two, yeah, maybe after 2 months, I felt like I was, you know, not Chinese, but I was used to this lifestyle. So the culture shock for me mostly was the food within the first 2 months. After that, it was just you knew what you were getting. Go to a new place, everyone's going to look at you weird. Someone's going to be brave enough and ask for a picture, and then you'd be left alone after that. So it was just, yeah, kind of just travel about and see what was happening.
Were there any customs that you kind of enjoyed and picked up along the way? Obviously, we took a couple of day trips and Linda explained what she could, but was there anything that almost became a regular occurrence for you or something that you enjoyed seeing while you're out in China that was just the norm for them?
Yeah, so we had where we were living straight across from us in our apartments was those mountains, weren't there?
Mm.
So we'd either walk up the mountain every other weekend or quite often, or we would drive to Chashan and drive up that mountain and see what was up there. So I think, yeah, just kind of where they lived for me was the most amazing part. And to them, it's just, we live here, it's used to us. But for me, like waking up in the morning and seeing a mountain outside my window that you can then just go up and climb up and then see where you're living from like a bird's eye view. That for me was probably the most amazing part.
I'd probably say the most amazing part of my end. I remember there was one kind of, I wouldn't say abandoned temple, but a temple that was having serious renovations up in the hills. And as soon as we realised how far the bike could get us up the hill before it struggled, and then how far we could walk it, a lot of these massive mountains opened up incredible views, I'd say. And then
Yeah.
really kind of, for me, that was the moment I kind of realised where I was, having that kind of bird's eye view of almost something that looked photoshopped in real life. It was quite crazy for me.
Yeah, because I remember we had the temple that was right next to where we lived, and
Yeah.
we could just walk, across the street and get to that, and that was incredible. But that abandoned temple, I remember, I think it was Paddy went up there and said, "We can drive up here. I've made it before." So someone took us up there, and yeah, it was just incredible. And yeah, especially the view and
Yeah.
the artwork that they had there as well, which we would
No,
never would have seen.
yeah, and the wood carvings. It's that whole, the culture of China is almost on every street, which is nothing like what you'd find in England, really.
Yeah. And even like the small things I'd say I'd miss. I remember coming back here and the first thing that I realized, and it was like a culture shock coming back home, was just how dirty and littered the streets are. Because in China, they had those people walking around the streets, didn't they? Just like sweeping up leaves and any old rubbish. And then you go for a walk here or in any city or, any town, you'll find crisp packets from like a decade ago.
That is probably the one thing. It was an interesting mix though because the it was quite polluted. Like the skies were always
Yeah.
smoggy, even in like peak summer, but the streets were immaculately clean to the point they looked like they were just made out of marble, like they were polishing the hell out of those floors.
And I remember a big thing for us lot when we first moved there were the trees and how the bottom half of the tree from like chest height down. Do you remember they were all painted white?
Yeah,
And I don't think we ever got an answer as to why that was.
there were always those odd like mysteries that we all had. Like we always noticed there was taxi drivers would have their really long pinky nail,
Yeah,
which we just didn't have a clue about. I mean, there were certain things like why are so many like people carrying umbrellas in the sun? But and obviously that's like a whole class thing. The nail thing is a whole another bit about class. But
yeah.
yeah, painted trees, and I
But
think
we,
the one thing that blew my mind was when we woke up one morning. I think maybe 6 in the morning to fireworks and chimes and bells and gongs and everything going off, and we looked out our windows and there's like a parade going down the street, and we were like, "This is the weirdest thing. There's a parade." And then we only realized that when it happened 4 or 5 more times, that was them, I think, doing a funeral march. Like so a family member died who was quite affluent and well known, and they were doing a parade down the street.
yeah, I remember that. That shocked me. To like, it was annoying because it woke us up in the morning, and then it was kind of sweet because here, like, death is kind of morbid, and no one wants to have that conversation about it. But there, it did seem like it was more of a celebration of life than it was a
Yeah,
sad affair.
there was a lot of those moments where we were just we kind of realized just how different certain interpretations were when it came to obviously being in China versus back home, even down to like the color red, how that is such a good luck color in China, and we were always handed red envelopes full of cash on certain days as a
Yeah,
as a thank you and a gift. But obviously red over here is usually a negative color when it comes to seeing something.
yeah, and green
So
over there was bad, wasn't it? Like, I remember green being told that green was the color of, you've been cheated on or a divorce or something bad has happened.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is usually quite a positive and fresh color for us.
Yeah,
I
even like
think,
the smallest things, like how like we call someone over and we do it like palm face up and then you flick your fingers inwards. They do it
yeah,
palm face down and do it that way. And I remember students trying to call me over doing that, and I'm thinking that's a weird way to wave goodbye.
yeah. And when they were doing putting their index finger and thumb together, not having a clue what we were doing or what they were doing, then I think it took about 8 months for us to realize when you look at it, it's supposed to look like a heart. It's supposed to
Yeah,
mean like care. And yeah, lots of little things. I mean, even I think how I learned to count to 10 using one hand and using all the your fingers held out in different ways, and
yeah,
yeah. But that's another thing as well. Obviously, none of us spoke Mandarin. None of us at all spoke Cantonese, and we did try, and a few people took up lessons, and we did ask Linda for help, and that just turned into a song.
yeah.
How was your grasp of learning Mandarin, and how did that go throughout your time in China?
So when I first moved out there, I knew how to say hello, and I'd say that was about it. I could ask how much is this, but if they gave me a number, I wouldn't be able to understand it. So yeah, I was one of the people who wanted to take lessons when we got there. So I remember the first thing that helped me was I met some foreign people in a bar, and they were like, "Oh, here's like a big group chat for Wenzhou." And then I think the only message that I sent in that group chat before I left was, "Can someone give me a contact for a Chinese teacher?" And then I got the contact. I asked the group, our own separate group chat, does anyone want to come? And it was me, Paddy, and Matt who took up the lessons. And for me, I've tried to learn languages, and I've always been one of those people that said, "Oh, I'd love to learn a language," but then put no effort into it. So for me, being in an opportunity where if I learn the language, my life gets easier, it was kind of, a win-win. I'll be learning something and my life gets easier, so you might as well. So yeah, like for me, learning the language was definitely helpful. And I remember, the shop that we used to go to,
Mm.
that was next to 19. I knew then when my Chinese was getting to a decent level, when we used to walk into that shop, and he always used to say something like "Hui Yin Guanling,"
Yeah.
and I remember never knowing what that said. I just thought it was like, a sound to let them know that someone's entered the shop. And it was the day that I walked in there, I understood what that said, and then I had a conversation with the woman behind the counter, and I left that I knew that, I could probably speak Chinese now. So then I had a goal in mind, which was to do a HSK.
Mm.
So I passed HSK 2 while I was in China, and I passed HSK 3 after I left. So I think that was in 2020.
How is your Chinese now?
Um, yeah, it's lacking, I'd say. So when I first moved back to the UK, and I've not told many people this story, um, I was applying for jobs and I got a job interview at Huawei. And
Nice.
on the job advert, it said English and good Chinese, which I took that it meant you need to be fluent in English and, you know, decent enough at Chinese. What they actually meant was you need to be fluent in Chinese and okay in English.
That's just a classic example of well, I suppose Chinglish, isn't it? Is what they
Yeah,
they would call it. Yeah, absolutely buggered because they didn't translate it in a right way.
yeah, but it was. I look back at it now and I laugh. Yeah, because I was going through a recruiter, and the recruiter had asked me at that. I did the phone interview with the recruiter. I didn't do it with the Huawei people, and it was all in English. And they were like, "Is your Chinese good?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I'm HSK 3, so I could probably, do okay at a university level."
Well, probably for a good thing now that Huawei isn't really a thing in England anymore. Silver
Yeah,
lining.
yeah, I guess you can look at it that way.
I mean, even from that as well, would you say your time in China, obviously shorter than anticipated, was it has it taught you many life lessons then? Obviously, you've learned a language, you've learned that whole sense of independence, but has it taught you anything that you've brought home with you and that you've kind of adapted into your normal life without maybe not without even knowing?
Um, I think so. 'Cause when I moved to China, I just turned 22. So I was coming out of that, I had a year after uni where I was just living with my parents, and it was kind of like regressing back into how I was back in high school. And then I was thrown into the deep end
Mm,
in China, not knowing how to deal with anything. And I think for me, that experience of just not knowing anything that's happening and kind of adjusting to how life is became the norm for me. And like, every experience, everything I was doing was just something totally new. And I think for some people it'd be quite frightening to live that way. But for me, it was more about every day was a new challenge. And to me, that's so much more exciting than knowing what's gonna happen next. So
yeah.
yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. Like, for me, the worst thing to hear, and I hate it when my parents say to me, is like, when are you gonna settle down? Because to me, that's just like,
Yeah.
okay, your adventure's over now. You're going to be stuck in this one place. And I would say I matured in China. So my maturation was more about not settling down and just keep looking for the next thing to do.
Do you think you'll ever work abroad again, or do you think that
Um,
might just happen naturally?
I'd like to. I think when I'm next looking for a role, um, I'll do like an even split of abroad and home. But I think if I'm looking to teach, I mean, if I'm looking to go abroad again, I don't want to do it the same way we did it last time as a teacher. I'd like to do more with what I'm, with the work that I'm doing now. So I think more
Yeah.
realistically, I'd be looking for somewhere in Europe or the Americas, but ideally Europe.
For those potentially debating about taking that year out, obviously none of us really planned on being teachers. I think the allure of the travel was probably just something, and the teaching was an easy way to go about it instead of worrying about what do we do day 3, 4, 5. But what bit of advice would you offer someone who's kind of unsure about going traveling and working abroad?
I think my advice would just be to go and do it. Like, you can hear people tell you their experience, whether it's good or bad, yours is going to be totally different. And especially for me, I went when I was, fresh out of uni. I didn't know much about the world, and I just went out there with open eyes and looking to experience things. So if you're the type of person who can just say yes, and if there's things that you don't want to do, don't do them. But if you've got the opportunity to do it and you're interested in it, you might as well do it, type of thing. So I've got a cousin who is, I think, not this month, next month, they're going to Korea to do the same thing. And this is after I brought them to China to come visit me when I was living out there when they were about 19. Um, yeah, I think anyone can do it. You don't have to be special to do it, and it's more of what you make it.
Mm.
Can you cut that and make it sound smart?
And I could put something together, but I think that was fine. I mean, a lot of people say the same. It's either down to a case of you don't know what you're doing, but everyone kind of plays it by ear, which I think a lot of our group did. We didn't really have a clue. We weren't really shown much. We weren't told much about the job. And as soon as we got the bike, everyone just kind of went in a direction. They just pointed
Yeah,
their bike and went. And people took on hobbies. People took on interests. You obviously took on a big shoe addiction shopping habit. Obviously Banda had his music, people went to go explore, people learn, some people kind of dived into it, and as we know, a few people are still in China, some of which have started families. So there are so many different things that have come out from us lot being in China from that first year
yeah,
that it's nothing that anyone could have anticipated. I mean, obviously two members of the group, Joe and Richard, they married to and have kids out there now, and it's again, you just didn't think it all these years later that some people would still be out there. You say, I was just gonna, you mentioned that, saying yes to a lot of things, having that kind of open mindedness to explore and, saying yes. Was there anything that you kind of regret not doing, or do you feel like you got any unfinished business out in China since your time there was cut short because of COVID?
yeah. At times, there was a few people that I was speaking to that, if I went back to China, I'd probably meet up with them and see them more. Uh,
Mm.
and there were places that I really wanted to see that I just put on, kind of the back burner. I'll see them next time. When I come back to China, I'll see them. Wait, no, that doesn't make sense. Yeah,
No, I know exactly what you mean, and
it was more COVID, so it was. If I wanted to go somewhere, I'd go, but I'd have places that I'd want to see, then somewhere else would come up, and I'd think, I'm still here for like another year. I'll go another time. But because of COVID, all that was cut short, and I couldn't see everywhere that I wanted to see. In terms of
oh no, please go.
feeling like being at home, I know what you mean. Like, after a certain amount of time, I used to want to go to Hangzhou all the time to see things, but it was like, okay, I've been once. It's kind of like going to Liverpool. I've been there one time. I don't need to go there again. I've kind of done it. But looking back now, there were things that I
Yeah.
wanted to do in Hangzhou where I thought I'd have more time and naturally go back. But now that I'm not there, I've lost that chance to do it.
I think that's why a lot of a lot of the people that I've spoken to that have come back after their time away just always have it in the back of their head about going away again. I think once you've had that bite of kind of the expat lifestyle, it never truly kind of goes away.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, you're going to be stuck with that forever. Like, because there's so much more
Yeah,
things to do. There's like that famous saying, like, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And it's that not knowing and knowing that you could go out there and go see it, but there's just too many things come in the way, like time and money. But if you're living out there
Yeah.
and expat out there, that's no longer, a threat or a worry because you can just take a weekend and go do it.
Whereas we've got the joy of just going to London or Manchester for a weekend. But
Yeah.
um, I think um, I think that's a great point to end on. We've talked a lot about obviously going out there, the kind of semi-professionalism that I think a lot of people find in certain schools, especially what we found in Wenzhou, and then obviously when it came to the culture and learning, you did quite a lot in the short span of time that you were there, and it's a shame that for a lot of people, a lot of journeys were cut short because of COVID. But
Yeah. But it's kind of,
I suppose,
one door closes, another one opens. So I'm just waiting now for that next opportunity.
yeah, and to be fair, that I mean, as we kind of find, that next opportunity could come from anywhere, even just a random person giving you a call that you think might want your kidneys.
Yeah. I'm so happy
So
I've got those. So
Aaron, but before letting you go and enjoying the rest of your day, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'm getting that monopoly down of the Wenzhou lot from year one. So thank you for your time.
no, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Greg.
No, it's been great catching up. But before I let you go, I have my little quick fire questions that I like to ask everyone, and shouldn't take too long. That's the aim of them. But was there an item that you forgot to take when you got to China that you had to go shopping for?
No, I think I was well prepared. Actually, no, a speaker. A speaker is definitely something I had to buy.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of fell in love with having that music, which leads me on to my next question. Is there a song that kind of takes you back to Wenzhou or that you played whilst you were out there that became almost the song on every playlist?
Yeah, we had a couple. Like when we were drinking, it would be Wonderwall uh, just before we were going out. And then I think in terms of my time in China, when I look back at it, um, there was that Chinese song that I found one day just in a chicken shop about a woman learning to speak cat, shui miao jiao. I think every time I put that on,
Oh, yeah.
just for fun, um, it always brings me back to us lot in KTV trying to sing it.
That's a very different one. I'll try and find that to stick on the old Spotify playlist. Um, Obviously, you picked up a fair bit of Chinese. I think that goes without saying. Is there a favorite phrase that you picked up and learnt?
Favorite phrase?
Yeah, I know a lot of people kind of go straight to Ting Budong.
I think Timbadong is up there, but I don't know if that was my favorite phrase. Um, I think it's one. Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. I just like the way it sounded more than anything. Um, it's Chabudois, which is I think I might be wrong. It's most likely that I am wrong. It's something about being around about something, like it's close to having something. Like you'd say, can I have 17 apples? Chabudois. It just sounded nice coming off
But
the
yeah, it
tongue.
sounds nice.
Yeah. What? Actually, can I change the answer? Can I change it?
Go change it, go on then.
Okay. Yeah, I think my favorite phrase probably would be 多少钱 because it didn't matter where you were.
So how much is it?
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you were. You could say that to a shop assistant. You could say it to someone in a restaurant. You could say it to a taxi driver, and they would always turn around and say, "Your Chinese is so good," and it would just hit you with that euphoria of like, "Oh, thank you." And then you just say "谢谢," which is thank you, and their face would light up, and your face would light up, and then you'd remember, let's not let the conversation go any further than that, otherwise I'm going to be revealed.
Yeah. For me, whenever I said it, it was a case of I could say it and ask how much it was, but I wouldn't have a clue on what the answer would be. So I think when they saw me staring back after they gave me the price, they'd immediately pull out their phone or the nearby calculator and just type it out for me because I got found out so quick.
Yeah, once I had I think numbers up to 100, and after 100 it gets simpler. Yeah, once I got to that point and they could say a number, I could get it quickly. I felt like I was a Chinese person, and I could just get through life like that.
Oh, I'm glad you got through life. I unfortunately did not. I could count to 10. But so, Aaron, final question. Obviously, China, big step. Always like to know what country is still on your bucket list that you want to go see.
So on my list, it's not a country, it's the Seven Wonders. So having been to China,
Okay.
I've done the Great Wall, and as we mentioned before the podcast, Paddy's in Egypt, so I've got a chance to do the pyramids. So if I've, almost done two off my list, I might as well complete the seven and go for the Seven Wonders.
Well, that's an ambitious task, and I suppose it'll take you to a few countries as well. But
Yeah.
not a bad goal to have, I'd say.
Yeah, well, that's the hope that it's
But,
possible, but we'll
but no,
see.
this has been, again, we'll see. There's still time. There is always time, and there's always opportunities as well. Again, I'd just like to say, Aaron, thank you again for coming on the show, and happy travels for the Seven Wonders.
Yeah, and to you, Greg, whether that's here or in the country. Right, take care.
Thank you for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the Tales from Travellers podcast to stay up to date on past and future episodes. I'm always looking to share new stories from expats and repats from all over the world. So please reach out if you'd like to share your story. You never know, your story could be the one that helps someone make that life-changing choice. You can find us on Instagram at Tales from Travellers. I'd love to hear your story, and more importantly, I'd love to share it with the world. I look forward to hearing from you, but thanks again for joining me, and until next time, happy travels.